Strain Podcast, a Southgate Media Group production, where we talk all about Guillermo del Toro's horror fantasy series, The Strain. We are currently covering the series' third season on FX. I'm your host, Blaire Knight Graves, executive producer and host of Professional Geek Podcast, and with me today is Kyle Tremblay, the editor-in-chief at TVBinges.com. You can find us on Twitter at BlaireLovesTV and at KyleLovesTV. And remember, both Kyle and Blaire have an E at the end. And you can follow this podcast's Twitter handle at TheStrainPod. And don't forget to play hashtag #TheStrainBingo with us every week for your chance to be on our show. Hey, Kyle, how you doing today?
Oh, Blaire, it's great to be with you here on the Strain of Thrones podcast. Yes, I'm your co-host, Kyle, and we're going to be covering the new FX/HBO crossover, Strain of Thrones.
Yes, that takes place in 58 AD.
Yes, and I guess throughout the centuries, probably, but this episode took place in 58 AD, and we pick up the story north of the Wall, where,
where the master has several different bodies, and the points don't matter. Just did everything at once. So Kyle, today you and I will be discussing Season 3, Episode 3, which was titled Firstborn, and was written by Chuck Hogan, one of the authors of the books that he co-wrote with Guillermo del Toro, and also the writer of our favorite episode, which I can't remember the name of.
Creatures of the Night?
Creatures of the Night, also the writer of Creatures of the Night. But yes, so Firstborn, mama drama episode.
So Chuck Hogan, and here's the episode that I want to see. The episode where Chuck Hogan and this other writer drop acid and write this episode. That's the episode of TV that I want to watch. I want to watch the behind the scenes of what happened going into this episode.
Yeah, me too. And I want to understand who's got all the mama drama, because that came out of somewhere.
Yeah. This is a very motherly episode.
Yeah.
But in the weirdest possible way.
Just
like in a Bates Motel kind of motherly way.
Yeah. Which I guess we should talk about it.
Where do we even start?
I know. Well, obviously there's, I believe, 3 mother lines. There's Gus and his mom. There's the Born and the witch who had a name. They called her something. Everybody was tweeting it at me. And then Kelly and Zach, obviously.
Yeah, she had a name. I forgot her name.
Yeah, me too. She's a witch. That's all I know. And it was just a bunch of plots of people having to deal with either being killed by their mothers or killing their mothers or trying not to kill their mothers.
I mean, yeah, we definitely have to deal with all those plots, but big picture, this was the show leaning into these sort of fantastical elements, I think more so in this episode than in the entire series to date combined.
Interesting.
I think the idea that we had this 58 AD storyline about who you called a witch, who knows everything about the master and sort of teaches Quinlan, and they go on like a journey together to like the snowy mountains.
For 2 years, because she dies in 60 AD, but she meets him in 58 AD.
Sure. It felt like the Game of Thrones thing is a joke, but it also this felt to me for large chunks like a fantasy show.
Yeah.
Which is something The Strain, if anything, is so claustrophobically a New York show that it was absolutely jarring to be like in the past, in the kind of indeterminate past, because, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but everyone was speaking English with an English accent. I think they were supposed to be in like the Roman countryside.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like the rise of Christianity that time period.
Somebody explained to me why when Angel and Gus talk to each other, they speak Spanish, but when citizens in 58 AD Rome speak to each other, they speak English.
I'm gonna bet that teaching Latin to the cast was gonna be kind of expensive.
It's like 4 lines. 4 lines. They don't need to take Latin 201 at the community college.
But that's also like a huge television and film trope that whenever you go back in time to whatever time period and whatever country you go back to, people speak in an English accent. That's a huge trope.
I'm just saying it was not convincingly 58 AD. It was not a very strong stand-in for 58 AD, the 1/10 they had on set. So,
Yes, yes.
um,
No, I no, it
yeah.
definitely like went in a direction that we have not. I mean, we did see like Quinlan fighting in the pits, right?
Yeah, but no,
Last season.
that's the historical past though. We're
Right.
talking about prophecy and destiny, and we're talking about very high fantasy concepts. Like the Quinlan is prophesized. This witch tells him to kill his father, the master, and we got into like deep fantasy. Like Quinlan has been on this quest for all these years. Yes, because of revenge, because he had to eventually, spoiler alert, drink his own sort of adoptive mother, but also because she instilled in him that he was the chosen one,
Hmm.
which is a concept that like is completely foreign to this otherwise very sort of forensic series.
Yeah, and completely foreign to me without discussing the books too much. But like the books were pretty good about like what we saw last season with Quinlan, like in the fighting ring and like all that historical stuff. But they never got into this high fantasy stuff that they're
Yeah.
getting into right now. And that's like the part that's really interesting to me. I mean, they have a little bit of it in the third book where they get like really weirdly religious for like 4 chapters,
Mhm.
but then it like kind of tapers off and gets better. So yeah, to see it played out this way and to position Quinlan into such a more protagonist prominent role was a really interesting choice. Everything about it was a really interesting choice. As you said, like it's a deviation from everything that we've really known about the strain. And it kind of, I think, left viewers feeling totally like mind boggled, like just having no idea what to do with that information because we come to the show for this very silly forensic show, this show about vampires as a parasite, and now we're talking about vampires as a parasite that also have something to do with a god, or have something to do with mythology and prophecy and all of that stuff. And it is a very different flavor.
Yeah, it's a different genre of show than what the strain normally is, which is it certainly made for an interesting episode. I will say, because yeah, we juxtapose that with the sort of normal strain business of doing strain stuff. But it was this whole Quinlan story just coming completely out of left field. I mean, we've had the ancients before. We've sort of dabbled in the mythology of the show. There clearly is a mythology that sort of F has been butting up against for the duration of the series, where he wants to solve the problem scientifically, and people, Abe primarily, but now Quinlan, have been telling him it's not necessarily a scientific problem to solve. But for it to come so front and center, and for the show to sort of dive in like that was just interesting. It was certainly it was a lot of things. As is the strange tradition, it wasn't executed especially well, but it was also like something I can appreciate, that they given it a shot and sort of expanding their own horizons as a series. And I guess the way that I watch The Strain, as maybe not the most serious of viewers, it sort of works with me, just because I kind of like when the show is weird. I think when in doubt, I'd rather have weird Strain than sort of buttoned up Strain.
Right.
So
Yeah, I don't know if this makes any sense, but I feel like the temperature of this episode really was more in line with the type of television I generally like. Like the pacing, the way that they executed each and every storyline, and the way that they all interconnected. Even though I am making fun of all the mama drama and all that stuff, there was something about this episode that was more enjoyable to me than your average Strain episode.
it had a theme, as you
Right.
said, the mama drama, as you eloquently put it. But like that is something that the Strain often just ignores. It's generally a part of like this kind of TV, where when you have sort of disparate groups of people that occasionally come together but are often doing their own thing, a lot of times an episode will be held together thematically.
Right.
They'll be doing completely different things, but there'll be a common thread. The Strain often just leaves that thread on the floor. This episode did have that thread. It was executed unevenly. I'm specifically thinking about Gus, who we probably need to talk about now.
Okay, so we have to talk about the series of events that lead to what happens to Gus and Angel, but I just need to say pretty upfront that I'm a little bit sickened that the two remaining people of color that are protagonists are now indentured slaves. Like,
Yeah.
like we've talked about there being race and gender issues on the strain before, but that is one of those where I'm just like, how could you not see what you've just done? Like, not only did you, like, you've done all these horrible things to all of the other people of color on the show, and now the two remainder who have speaking lines regularly are like
this is
shoved into a chain gang.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. This is also an episode that, and correct me if I'm wrong, did not feature any of our normal women in the cast.
No.
It introduced the witch lady, which is fitting. The only woman in the episode is a witch. But were there literally any other women on screen?
Gus's mom and Kelly.
Monsters.
Monster
so
women.
Our three women were witches and monsters, and our two people of color were indentured servants.
Yes.
That's where we're at in terms of the strain and diversity.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. In a nutshell.
That's our strain diverse status update.
Yes, for those of you who are wondering.
If you've been keeping score this long,
yeah.
and haven't killed yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to get back to the core of Gus's episode, part of the episode, outside of that horrible situation that the strain has now gotten itself into, it was great to see Angel back. That is.
I honestly thought he died.
I did too. I really did
too. The first two episodes, I didn't even say it on the podcast because I just assumed I forgot his death.
Right.
So I've just been operating under the assumption that Angel was dead this whole time.
Yeah, no, me too. I couldn't remember if he had died or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's this thing I won't say. But yeah, I couldn't remember if he had died or not. And then when he randomly showed up, I was like so tickled. I was so pleased to have him back.
We have to I'm hoping you can explain Gus for me. Because last week I was so confused about Zach, and this week I feel like I'm right back in that confusion prison cell. It's just because of Gus. What is going on with him?
I don't know. And where you're talking about, like, you thought that Angel had died, I also thought that Gus was beyond this point. Like, I thought, like, when we started the series back up at this point, I was like, what? like where did we leave him that I can't remember from last season that this is where he would end up,
I'm going to ask a question that could easily be looked up on Google, but because we're recording the podcast, I can't, so I'm hoping you remember. What episode did his mom die in?
Oh, she got eaten in, like, season 1, episode 4 or something. Like,
so he's gone.
It's been a long.
Yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah.
That's problematic. Because he, if memory serves, moved past that in the show. Like, he was dealing with other things in life. He had other stories post Mother's death.
Yes, and then came back home at some point.
So are we to believe that the whole situation where he chained up his mother and has been feeding her happened off screen in season 1 and was an off screen story in season 2?
No, because she was definitely present in season 2. Remember, they speak to the master through her at one point. I'm 90% sure that happens in the TV show, not the books.
that makes sense. And then he maybe captured her because
yes. And so, like, they were, like, keeping her in a cage, I think, at the shop for a while so that they could speak to the master through her. And then when they all get separated, he goes back to his apartment with her, and now he's feeding her blood out of a dog bowl.
This is... Who thought this was a good idea? I genuinely want to know, like, who in the writer's room was like, yep, sign off, rubber stamp, this is the story we're going to tell about Gus these first 3 episodes.
I think that they couldn't. Honestly, what I think it is that they couldn't figure out what to do with Gus because they went well out of their way to change what happens with him in the books, which I don't think this is a huge spoiler, but like he has like a gang of vampire fighters and that's what he does in the books. That's Gus.
Yeah.
Like he's the leader of the vampire killing gang. And yes, it's pretty racially stereotypical, but it's, you know, it's interesting and there's a lot of dynamics that he has with other gangs and all that stuff. And then in the TV show, they decidedly didn't do that because there's a diversity problem in the show. And now they don't know what to do with him. And so they locked him in his old apartment with his mom.
Yeah, and it all apparently in the service of getting him to the police station so he can start this crew now, be put to work, as we said, as an indentured servant.
Right.
Like, there are cleaner ways to tell that story. If that's B and you need to get from A to B, there are way easier ways to get Gus there. Like last season, remember he was working in a diner? Like, what is going on with the story? Like,
his mom was not present at all during the diner story. That's the other part.
Yeah.
It's like he was working in the diner with the family, he fell in love with the girl, and then they like sent them off on their own, and then now he's back with his mom. And
I just, like, the show does not know what to do with Gus. And it obviously does not know what to do with Dutch. That's like a third of the main cast.
And the diverse portion of the cast.
Yeah, it's also the only non-white men of the cast. It's like, that's deeply problematic. Like,
yes.
That's like, you can't... It's not a show with a large cast, and you can't figure out what to do with like significant portions of the people, and they're just giving them these garbage nonsense. Like what Gus did in this episode with Angel as an accomplice, Gus dragged Angel down with him. He weaponized his mother, as I tweeted, and killed like police, people who are there. Not to, like, loot and rob, but, like, it's like Feraldo's police crew.
Right.
And they intentionally murdered two of them.
Yeah.
That might be the worst thing anyone has done on this show.
I liked what you tweeted. You said that, you know, just so you guys are aware, the people who were right in this situation were the police officers who got killed.
That is, like, unquestionably the case. They murdered well-intentioned law enforcement officers who were doing nothing wrong. Like, it was not a situation where they were, like, profiling or stereotyping. It would have been very easy to write those police officers as, like, violent and mean and corrupt, but they weren't. They were written like well-intentioned people who were there for exactly the reason they said they were, to clear the building out of Strigoi, which, by the way, Gus is harboring in an extremely dangerous way. Like, Gus and Angel are clearly the bad guys in that scene, and the only people who weren't aware of that were the writers of the scene, who wrote them sympathetically.
Right. Like, well, Angel, I mean, in the way that an accomplice is a bad guy, I don't think that Angel, like...
Angel should have knocked Gus out and put a stake through his mother's head. Like, that is... You can't... These people all know better than this. This is not a case where sympathy factors in. Like, Gus has had some kind of mental break, and he has caught amnesia and forgotten who he was for the first 20-some days of this whole thing, for the first 2 seasons of the show. It's Angel's job to, like, set him straight. Like, this is insanity. It's
pretty, I mean, obviously what they're getting at is getting them to get to this indentured servitude position, and hopefully that's where Gus will pick up his gang, and then they will continue on with that plot.
But I hate them both now.
Right, no.
They are literal murderers who should be in prison for life if this was the normal world. Like, if they just walked up to 2 law enforcement people who were doing their job and killed them, they would be on death row right now. Yeah. Like, I don't, there was no utility to it other than trying to escape with their Strigoi mother. Like, this is insanity to do that to like a main character who you ostensibly want the audience to root for. Mm-hmm. How do you root for Gus after that? That's a murder. It's a homicide.
I'm gonna bet that most of the audience is not taking it as seriously as you
But that's like, I'm just like, I'm trying to like take the show seriously.
No, I know, but the way that it was written was not for us
No.
to feel that way about them. And I've said this on podcasts and in my old critiques of Dexter that was my biggest problem with Dexter is writing a character who you're supposed to like, killing innocent people. I don't, people who aren't innocent, we can deal with that later.
No.
But it's innocent people that are the problem. Not that we know anything about the history of these men, but they are presented as innocents, and therefore we must assume that they are innocents, and we must assume that Gus and Angel just did something terrible.
Yeah.
Or Gus did something terrible, and Angel did something terrible by proxy.
No, and you're right. The show breezes over it so fast, but it's like, how does that... I don't understand the point in writing that scene that way. Why would they commit a murder?
Well, it's human life is also not taken very seriously in this world. We also have to remember that. Like, even though the whole show is about preserving human life from the vampire apocalypse, it is pretty outstanding how frequently we see people be killed and it not matter to anybody at all.
Yeah. There was just something, like, this one bothered me. Just, there was something about the breeziness with which it was done, and the fact that usually the show at least writes the victims as, like, unsympathetic. Like, couldn't they have just been looters?
Right.
Couldn't they have been, like, the remnants of Dutch's crew? That would have been a nice way to tie it in. But yeah, like, I if they had murdered those people, it's like, yeah, it's not like, but these are supposedly for all those people, right? Like, am I missing? They were, yeah, because it wouldn't have made so much more sense if they were pretending to be for all those people. Like, I just don't know why they have to be in it, because we're supposed to be with this character, and he has, the utility of doing that was to try to escape with his mother, who has been turned into a vampire.
For 23 days.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while. It wasn't recent.
No. I'm right there with you, man. I just don't know. I guess part of me is wondering, like, when we expand on this Chang Gang story, are we going to find out that these actually aren't for all those people? Like, I'm open to, like, to another explanation, as it were.
Yeah, sure.
But knowing the strain, I probably won't get it.
No, we spent all last season keeping that candle alive for Coco being a double agent.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Every episode we said at one point, I think we are 100% sure she's a double agent.
And then
she was not.
She was just, yep.
She was not.
So I shouldn't hold the candle for this either. But
that's so dumb. It's so dumb. Like, the way that they treat their characters. This is what I talk about with Zach all the time. Why do they treat their supposedly sympathetic characters so shabbily? Like, they're so like callously having the characters do things that would make the audience hate them, and the show is just like blindly stumbling around into these things. There's no thought given at all to any of this, it feels like. There's just no consideration for how the audience perceives the characters. It's just like, these are our heroes, root for them.
Well, they did add, speaking of Zach, they did add that bit of dialogue you were hoping that they would add in last week's episode. Did you hear it?
Yeah, no, they clarified. Way to do it a week late. We all could have understood Zach's motivations better if that dialogue had come last week, but better late than never.
At least I was right.
You were right. You did diagnose it on your second viewing.
But that's the thing. I shouldn't take a second viewing.
No, it should have been the freaking A story of the episode. That whole like line of emotional reasoning of why Zach was like, we needed some mechanic to understand what Zach's mindset was, because they clearly had it in mind, and I guess it tracks, but it was presented like in such a weird way, and it was only confirmed this week that I sort of lost my mind on the character last week, and I suspect a lot of people didn't understand why he was behaving that way. It's like, well, if you figured out why, tell us why. Figure out a way to tell us why. Like again, protect your character. You know, it's a character that you want the audience to have sympathy for. Protect him. Figure out a way. Like, the Strain is so... I've never seen a show worse at this. Like, and I say this, like, honestly and without exaggeration. I've never seen a show worse at making the audience like characters that it wants the audience to like. No show has ever fumbled that so spectacularly. The Strain has, just from day one, like, didn't everyone hated Nora? We were supposed to like Nora. Everyone hated Nora. Like, the show just can't get it right when it comes to making us like characters that should be likable.
Except for Fett.
Yeah, Fett's the one. But again, they're batting like 50%, which for... like, par for the course is 90%. It's one of the easiest things a show can do. Almost every show gets this right. You know, like, you make the audience like the character that you want the audience to like. And the Strain gets it wrong half the time.
Well, and genre TV is known for this, that it's generally the side characters that people end up falling in love for. Name any genre show, and a gazillion fans can name the background characters or the secondary protagonists that are, like, their favorite, and they love the ensemble, and that's what really works about genre television. And the Strain has not, and I probably will not ever accomplish that.
That's a great point. It's amazing that there is no, like, I mean, pick a show, you know, like that, where there's, like, minor fringe characters, like the X-Files with the lone gunman, is it?
Yes, the lone gunman on
Right?
the X-Files. Like, or like we watched Grimm and we loved Monroe, or
Yes.
or Hank, or if you could.
Or Wu would even be more into this line of where they're not even like a main cast, they're sort of fringe cast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, on Grimm and I mean, Game of Thrones, take your pick, right?
Right, exactly.
There's so many, like, side characters that you love to see.
Right, like Hodor, everybody.
Hodor, right, yeah. Oh, Hodor, you broke my heart. But, like, what? You're right, like, the characters that people love on the Strain are Fett, definitely. Quinlan, who, despite all the weirdness, had a really good episode this week.
Yes.
Really good Quinlan episode. I hope they don't kill him off. Because Quinlan is one of the things the show really has going for it this season.
Yeah. And then
Icarst.
Yeah.
Love Icarst. Icarst, I guess, is that character, a sort of fringy character.
Right.
You know.
I think people are starting to really like Kelly as a bad guy, but they're not sympathizing with Zach and Kelly at all. Like, that's not connecting at all. But
I thought the look that Kelly gave when she was with Zach at the beginning of this episode was really creepy and good.
Yeah, no, that actress is fantastic.
Yeah, Natalie Brown. She is excellent.
Yeah, she has done a phenomenal job with that role.
I think that this is the first time this season, this season is the first time that the Kelly character is really, really clicked. Like, last season she was just, like, sort of stalking the compound all season, but now she's, like, sort of has a little bit more agency to get dialogue and stuff, and that performance is excellent, and I really like where that character is this season.
Yeah, me too. Okay, we have gone way too long without talking about, like, that huge surprise ending.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah.
The master got beheaded, and the major parasite that is the master got away. And I don't know if Kelly walked away with the Oxydolumen.
She did.
Tuxedo Ramen.
The bad guys now have the Tuxedo Ramen.
Yeah, I loved that. Like, three of our tweeting community tweeted that to us today. I was like, oh my god, people remember.
I don't call it the Tuxedo Ramen anymore, but I'm so glad you guys, please keep that going.
Yeah, Tuxedo Ramen. But yeah, so she got away with the Oxydolumen, which is like banana pants to me.
Yeah.
Because we spent an entire season getting that book, and then we lose it in 3 episodes. Yes. Like, it was literally the plot of last season.
You would have thought that Abe would have taken better care of it, and you also thought, like, Quinlan and F would have taken better care of it. Like, it seems like, given the story importance of this book, everyone was being awfully cavalier. Like, F was literally hitting vampires in the stinger with it.
I know.
Everyone was like, this book is like this mythical, one-of-a-kind thing, and F is like swinging it around like a piñata.
And he almost drops it in the water, right? Like to fake out the master, like, I'm gonna drop it.
It's just being really, really aggressive with how you're handling this priceless, literally the fate of the world depends on it book.
Yeah. But then the master got beheaded. I'm sorry. Like, I need to talk about that. Like, I like that they went like a callback to like, hey, remember that the master has other bodies, like as like a subtle, not so subtle,
in the flashback, the Quinlan flashback.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. Like to be like, by the way, this happens. Like, don't forget, we're moving on. But like Bolivar is gone. The Bolivar body.
Yeah, Bolivar is done after introduced in the pilot episode. He finally has met his permanent end.
Yes, which leaves a lot of questions about what's going to happen to the major parasite.
Yeah, I assume he's going to take another body.
Right, but does he take? He usually would take a vampire body, right?
I do not know. I don't know how this works. We've only seen him transfer into Bolivar's.
Right, but Bolivar was already a vampire. So
yes. Well, yeah. I would assume that if he does not take Icarus' body, then Icarus will be doubly upset, considering how he reacted the last time.
Right. I mean, I think that Richard Sammo could probably do a great job with that, but given the fan propensity to love Icarus, it would be really hard to lose the personality of that character.
Here's what I want, and here's a move that I think would solve a lot of the show's problems. Make Kelly the master.
I do too. I feel that way too.
That's a chess move that tidies up a lot of what's on the board right now.
Yep.
and I just think that's probably the move to make, which means it's not the move the Strain will make, but that would I think really fix a lot of what's going on, and create some interesting stories going forward.
Or Zach. I mean, that's the one that I'm really hoping they don't do.
Boy.
I don't think that kid can carry that performance, but I mean, that would be the other.
It would be so incongruous to have the most powerful being in the universe be this snot-nosed kid. Like, there could be some comedy from that, but it just like from a scary TV show perspective, boy, they'd have to do a lot of work with makeup.
Yeah, they would, and I don't know if the performance could do it, but it would be an interesting deviation for F. If F is to remain our protagonist, that would be an interesting way to sort of really make him work.
It would definitely create some emotional stakes for F. There's no question about that.
Well, because they even had the dialogue in this episode between Quinlan and F where F says to Quinlan that, am I really willing to give up the entire world for the soul of one person? And like, so that could be.
Yeah.
That could be like sort of an.
No, like it could be. I'd be very interested how that worked out, but yeah, no, it. I mean, they're keeping Zach for a reason, right? It can't just be to blackmail F.
Right. Well,
because they didn't even do it. It was one of the feelers who was in the bag, so they didn't even bring Zach to the meeting. They obviously have some sort of future purpose for him.
I think it was the kid who Kelly ate in the episode.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
Which is why, she made him because he looked like him and connected all those pieces that were so confusing.
That's true. Well, that all makes sense. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Great. Once again, the show connects the dots, but probably could have done a better job at setting up how well they were connecting the dots. Yeah. There's those moments like when you're watching Breaking Bad where you're like, oh, that's brilliant. Like they just paid off the season 2 story that was referenced in season 3. I don't think I've ever had that moment in The Strain, even though they create those moments, because they never do a good enough job at like drawing your attention to the right place. Like they're a magician who does the trick, but who you're like staring at the wrong hand. They just can't quite present it in a way in which I'm impressed with the show.
Right. No, I get you. I'm in the same boat. No, I guess I'm very interested to see what happens. I thought that the production of this episode was pretty stellar. And outside of the Gus character, and a couple other little hiccups here and there, it was written pretty interestingly, and I'm interested to see what they do with the rest of the season. But it's just so, I was saying this out loud to myself, like, you guys shaved 3 episodes so that this wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Like they're traditionally so far have been a 13 episode series for each season, and this season is only 10 episodes. Because they like shaved 3 episodes to try to fix the problems that they were having, and none of those problems got fixed.
Yeah, there is no like noticeable difference this season.
No.
Honestly, which is I think unquestionably a disappointment.
Yes.
That the so often shows are fixed by having like a set end date and by shortening. Like the problem with almost every TV show is that it needs to be shorter. Like that
Yes.
that is every TV show that doesn't exactly work. You can usually shorten the season, shorten the episode, and get down to what works, and then it's a good show. For whatever reason, The Strain having this shorter season has not really affected anything. I do like that the show was pretty bold in getting rid of this current body of the Master.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I was sort of wrestling with this because it does seem like they let the worm get away. Like this is like all they had to do was step on that worm and game over, right?
Right. Every vampire drops dead.
But it's like, I guess the whole thing with Quinlan, the whole thing with Abe was that he wanted to read the Oxidolumin very slowly and take it all in. Which, by the way, couldn't he have taken a cell phone and just taken a picture of every page?
I know, or scanned it.
Abe's whole thing is that the information is what's important. Quinlan's whole thing was that the book itself is what's important because it could be used to lure the Master. But Abe's thing is that the contents of the book are what's important. If that's what's important, you can scan it, you can take pictures. Those contents of the book should have been digitized immediately. And then the book doesn't matter to you anymore. Then you can use you could have done both plans. You could have taken pictures of every page and had Abe study those, and then Quinlan could have used the book as bait. This isn't rocket science. But anyway, apparently they didn't do that because Abe was sad to lose the book. But it just I forgot what I was saying because I got off on that tangent.
I'll just say I can't wait until you and I do the breakdown of book 3 together.
I'm excited. I'm excited to read the book. I already have a sense that the season is very different than what that book is.
Yeah, no, I remembered halfway through this recording earlier, I said, oh yeah, the third book isn't that mystical. No, the third book is like a totally different book from
I don't mind them. I should say again, I don't mind the sort of mysticality of all this. Like to me, that's not inherently bad. I don't think there is something inherently bad about the show becoming a little bit more interested in its own lore and a little bit less detached from sort of present day New York that it's been ground in. It's just it's again, the characters are still behaving very stupidly. Which is a problem that persists throughout time. But yeah, I remember what I was saying. It's that I was sort of mad that they didn't do anything about the worm, like they didn't give chase.
Oh yeah.
But I'm guessing that's the fact that Abe was trying to discern and never got around to because they took the book before he could get to it, which is that the Master is actually just a worm.
Right. He's a parasite.
He's a parasite, but he's not this frog monster. That is sort of like an evolved form. Like that's what happens when the worm fuses with the human. Mm-hmm. But he is just that worm. That's all the Master is.
Yes.
Which is very much like the CBS show Brain Dead, by the way. But anyway, different subject. But I think it's plausible that they didn't know that. And
that's fair.
They didn't know that. Like, they didn't know that he was a worm. They thought he was like this frog monsterish figure that we saw when he transferred bodies. We thought that was his true form. Like, I assumed that they thought he had a true form, and that form was decapitated as part of Bolivar being decapitated. And just no one, including Quinlan, because he hadn't read the contents of the book, realized that his entire consciousness was this worm. Mm-hmm. And that's why they were unprepared, and that's why everyone was shocked, and that's why no one was ready to do anything about it.
Nobody put a boot down.
Nobody put a boot down. Yeah, but that to me makes sense, and I'll buy it. Like that's why they sort of let him escape. Mm-hmm. So I bought that whole thing. I mean, it was obviously pretty dramatic with the sort of Strigoi SWAT team showing up, and Quinlan making a rather impractical entrance, walking from like 300 yards away, firing guns.
I know.
Seems like he could have gotten the drop on the Master.
I know. It was such a dumb scene, the way that all played out.
Yeah, no, the mechanics of it were dumb, but it was a fun scene. That was
Yeah,
sort
it
of
was
this.
fun.
That
Yeah.
was sort of this episode. It was I think a very dumb episode, but it was also really entertaining, and I enjoyed myself watching it, even while being frustrated by how dumb the characters behaved, and also by what you mentioned, the fact that our two non-white characters are now like conscripted into service, and one of them appears to have gone completely insane, and the show doesn't realize it. And our female characters were nowhere to be found this episode, and the only women who appeared on screen are literal monsters. Um, those were the only things that were actually problematic. The rest of it was just sort of the usual strange stupidity. And I thought it was like overall like an okay, entertaining, if not especially like good episode.
Right. No, I had a good time. I thought that the Quinlan backstory was really well written. So like
Yeah,
this episode will definitely be memorable to me.
absolutely. I'll remember
Yeah.
this. I'll remember
Yeah.
58 AD.
With the druid with like his eyes written on his cheeks. That's an old druidic thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
I like that. That was the only sort of like, because the rest of it was kind of just like a dark campfire.
Yeah.
Again, we didn't see the majesty of the city of Rome exactly.
No. No. But no, overall memorable episode, and
Yeah.
let's hope in the next episode, much like they did with Zach in this episode, that they kind of like come back and they're like, all right, no wait, we're really making this okay for Angel and Gus, and like bring Dutch and Feraldo back.
I think the one question going forward that we haven't addressed yet is how soon the Master will return. Because it took him a good while to transfer forms last time. After season 1 when he got burned, it was like a big process for him to go from one form to another. I'm curious how quickly he's going to go to another body.
Yeah, and
what will happen in the power vacuum if it lasts for a while with I assume Kelly and Eichhorst running the show.
Right.
That will be interesting.
That will be very interesting if he doesn't have a body ready, because I imagine he doesn't.
No, I don't think he was anticipating being ambushed there.
Yeah, and there's no obvious choice to the audience except for Kelly, and the likelihood of them actually doing something smart for once.
Yeah, no.
Very low.
Kelly would be very compelling as the Master, I think.
Yes.
And really, again, really help with the show's female problem.
Yes.
Making her like the coolest character would be really, really good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I do want to give a shout out to the String Bingo winner from last week, who I was not able to schedule to get on this week's episode, but I just want to make sure that I give her a shout out. Her name is Victoria Benning, and she's at VL Benning, BENNING, and she tweets every week with the strains. So she won the Strain Bingo last week, but I wasn't able to get her on. But congrats, Victoria, for winning last week. We did not have a bingo this week, did we?
No, we did not have our Eichhorst sass this week. After last week we talked about how it was inevitable. Eichhorst didn't appear in this one.
There was a remark about a German vampire and like something that was sassy about Eichhorst, but there was no actual sass.
We heard tell of the Eichhorst sass, but we did not actually witness the sass firsthand. So yeah, that I think threw off everyone's bingo card. That's normally a free square. So yeah, I will say the very like the cold open of this episode, like it opened with a flashback, which is one of our squares. So many squares were checked off right away with this episode.
It was like 4 squares got checked off in the first 5 minutes.
We were on a great pace, and then we kind of petered out. As the episode got weirder and weirder, it actually got away from the sort of normal tropes of the show.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we didn't have a bingo actually probably speaks to how sort of different this episode was.
Yeah.
Because we didn't hit a lot of our normal beats.
That's very, very fair. Well, this wraps up our 32nd episode of the Strain Podcast. Before we go, I want to mention a few things. You can download and subscribe to our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. You can also hear all of our podcasts at our website, southgatemediagroup.com. Please subscribe to this show and also rate us. Follow the show on Twitter at The Strain Pod, and Kyle and I at Kyle Loves TV and at Blaire Loves TV. Blaire Loves TV.
Blaire loves TV.
TV, I do love TV. And remember, that's Kyle and Blaire with an E. Send us fan mail at thestrainpodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to play hashtag #TheStrainBingo with us every week for a chance to be on the show. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.